Okay, so if you would, your name, whatever your title is, and the company name, please.
I'm Michael, Mike Jr. In fact, there's two of us here, and largely I machine program and operate the two mills here alongside with my teammate Dustin. He's operating the lathes.
Okay, and the company is TooHighPSI. How'd you come up with your company name?
It's a name my dad had from the 90s. So TooHighPSI started off as a Fox body upgrade company. So basically after I'd been born and life had some changes, the company kind of died away for a little bit, and then when I was finishing up college, decided to bring back the name and get into the LT arena and try to do what we loved again.
Okay, so how did you start off in the business? Was it after school, after college?
It was actually in the middle of school. It's kind of funny, my dad had called me one day and said there was an opportunity for the VF4 we have over there. Decided to go forward with it. We thought we'd just make our own car parts with it, make our own upgrades as we went along, and I ended up really enjoying working on that VF4. Kept practicing with it, getting better at using it, and sure enough, we started releasing some of our own products and people had interest in them. And it's grown into our machine shop having 4 machines now, and the whole product line we currently have.
Right, so you went to, what school did you go to?
Cal Poly.
Okay, did you do any machining at Cal Poly?
A little bit. Most of what I was doing here, though, was actually coming back on the weekends to run the VF4, and then I would go back to school.
Okay. Okay. So you're essentially self-taught. Not essentially, you are self-taught.
Yeah, for the most part, and a lot of help from your guys' videos.
Can you describe in a little bit of detail the types of parts that you make specifically, so people understand?
So specifically, we're largely focused around port injection kits right now. So with the newest generation of LT, or GM V8 motors, they're all direct injected. So we tried to introduce a cost-effective, super easy to install way of introducing port injection into your car. Now it's going to allow you to run different types of fuel. In our case, we largely run E85. It lets you, run a little more timing, more boost, get that more power out of your motor that you want without having to break the bank.
Got it. Okay, so cost-effective.
Yeah.
Fast and cost-effective.
Exactly. That's the best way to do it.
Okay, that makes sense. And you race yourself, right? We were just talking off camera.
Yeah.
So what do you? How long have you been racing? What kind of car? How often?
So I've been going to the drag strip ever since I had a driver's license. Usually I kind of drive whatever we have there. It used to be my 18 Camaro I had for a while. That was our first test subject for our port injection kit. So I drove that when it was stock, and then after it had our kit on it, and it was, then validated that we could move forward with these kits. Then from there, I have my 73 Maverick I got from my grandpa. So that's my new drag car right now, and it's a boatload of fun. Yeah.
Okay. So how do you, we talked a little bit off camera, how do you had a kind of a cool story, how do you equate what you do racing with what you do machining? As far as, remember we were talking about how you try to go faster and...
Oh yeah, well it's kind of, when you start off with machining, where I was very cautious because I wasn't, entirely sure of what I could get myself into, what was going to break, what the right speeds and feeds to be running were at that time. So you kind of start off slow and get used to it, but then once you kind of get your handle, the next goal you're going to be going for is to try to go as fast as possible. Push the machine as hard as possible, cut as much material as possible. Always watch that number for how quickly the parts are coming out of the machine. Then you start to reach some limits and you start breaking stuff, much like a car. So you got to learn some moderation, limitations of your machine or your vehicle, and change the way you modify both to what works for best for each.
Yeah, so there's a lot of similarities.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I never thought of it that way. Okay, so you started with the VF4, and basically you're making parts for yourself at first, right? To put on your car,
Yes.
move them out, and then you'd make a few parts for, is it kind of like friends, fellow racers? How did things kind of grow?
I think it kind of grew to the fellow racers category, but I think any product that we have released, it's because we want it on our own cars, right? all these parts we have, we use ourselves, and it's because it's stuff we like and we wanted, and we saw opportunities to improve them, and that's kind of what we've been trying to do.
Okay. So you had a VF4. You had just a single machine at the time?
Yes.
Okay. What was your next machine?
Next machine after that was our ST30Y.
Okay.
Live tooling. It was a big step to go switch from the milling category now to the turning side of things.
That's a big leap.
It is. Turning's a little more scary, I gotta say. Just gotten used to it, and Dustin's really a master at that. So he kind of took the reins there and pushing forward there. Then after that, we bought both our SC20 and our VF2 at the same time. We noticed both machines were at their max capacity, and we had to step things up.
Okay. And that's this VF2 here?
Yes.
VF2, the pallet pool. So you guys decided, what made you decide to put the pallet pool? Usually the easy button is just to buy a VF2, right?
Right.
It's easy, you know it. Buying that pallet pool is a pretty big leap. So can you kind of talk through that a little bit?
So the pallet pool we bought for two large reasons. Obviously, we want to increase production and get some nighttime running out of it. We have some parts that have 2-hour cycles. If I can get each pallet to have a 2-hour cycle, I'm getting 8 hours of runtime overnight. But the other thing was keeping a vertical style mill was a nice stepping stone for me to figure out the pallet pool. So the VF4, I was pretty comfortable with that. I was comfortable with the fact that I could run a VF2 effectively while also juggling the pallet pool as well.
Okay, so it's funny. We had a little meeting about automation and how to present it to customers, and where we landed is exactly what you said. It's like you're not doing anything different. You're just expanding your capacity.
Right.
Good. So, and be completely honest here, what are some of the challenges with a pallet pool? How do you have to think differently when you have a pallet pool as opposed to not?
That's a good question. One thing that's going to change in your mindset is the machine almost needs to always be continually running, right? In the case of a pallet pool, I can always be setting something up in the load station to keep the machine running. So getting your timing right for that is going to be very critical. Deciding how you're going to set up the pallets. In our case, it made sense. The first part we released that came off the VF2 was our valve covers. They have 4 critical parts in them. That means I delegated each pallet to have one part of the valve cover. So every day I was getting a full kit, multiple full kits of valve covers rather than all of one piece, all of the next piece. But yeah, the other thing that changed my mindset too, and it's luckily translating back to the VF4 now, is getting as many parts on the table as possible. So when you get all those parts there, you can hit that runtime. If you get now an hour instead of the 30 minutes, that's an hour where I could have been programming the next part.
Sure. Haas Tooling is something we talked about. What made you decide to try the Haas Tooling to begin with?
Well, to be totally frank, it was price point and the ease of being able to get it. Most of the stuff, luckily where we're located, we get tooling from Haas that comes the next day. And once we had tried it, it ended up being really awesome tooling, at least for aluminum, which is kind of all we work with. From my point of view, it's been top notch. I tried using some other companies' face mills. I went through 3 separate different face mill companies until I landed on the Haas, the high polished aluminum one, and that one blew them out of the water for me, at least.
Cool, great to hear. Can you talk a little bit about, even though we just talked about it off camera, the tool you were showing me?
Yeah, so I just got some of the diamond-like coated end mills. I picked up 1/2 inch, 1 inch, and I wanted to see how they competed against my current roughing end mills. And in a back-to-back test, between the two of them, using the same end mills, I had my old end mill set up speeds and feeds to run at 100% load. And that's almost, I think it was over 1 inch depth of cut, 2 inch radially. I switched to this new Haas end mill and loads are 70% and the machine's silent. Like the other one, you could feel it almost wherever you were. So, testing it back to back like that and actually seeing improvements, then my mind's made up.
Yeah, yeah, direct back-to-back test.
Yeah.
Tells the tale. So where does TooHighPSI go from here, in your mind?
Well, I think we have some pretty exciting plans going forward. We have a couple more parts we want to finish in the LT arena and move into the LS arena a little bit. I think there's always room for improvement and development, and that's kind of what we continue to do. And continue to make our own cars faster. These are parts, we got to use every day, so might as well make them as best as we can and enjoy them.
Sure. How about future equipment? Is that even in your head? I don't.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit, please.
Just because I've come to really like my TRT 210, I would love a UMC of some sort, and I think that's probably going to be our next step. And also the benefits we've seen from the pallet pool, it's kind of hard to argue against getting a pallet pool on the next machine, just considering the extra runtime you get out of it.
So consider maybe a UMC with a pallet pool, is that?
Ideally.
Okay.
I think so.
How do you typically get your tooling? Like, even before you were using Haas Tooling, were you doing stuff online, or do you have a local vendor that will stop and buy? Or
Using a local a vendor.
so what are the pros and cons of using a person that's coming in to help you versus getting the stuff off the website on HaasTooling.com?
He wasn't specifically coming in, and some stuff I emailed them just to get, which I guess one thing that's really nice is for some of those just weird tools that you need, they're able to get them. Haas is more of the everyday, the half and gen mills, but I've been noticing more stuff getting released right now, like some engraving mills and things like that, which, the other tools have worked out, so it's kind of hard to not want to test those.
Okay. Yeah, that's exactly what we are going for. Is we always talk about we want to be the 80% of the tools that you use. We're not going to be that that exotic tool that you need for some odd job. We're going to be the 3/8 half-inch end mills.
Yeah.
Face mills.
And one benefit of having the online setup versus if I was communicating with someone is we all share, like at least Dustin and I share an account. So then we put stuff in our cart. Hey, Dustin, I'll make an order later. Puts whatever he needs in the cart, send it off, and then we both get whatever we needed.
So when you're deciding what cutting data you're going to use, speeds and so forth, are you going to that customer's to that tooling provider's website, or are you getting that from the person who's providing the tools, or are you kind of just winging it based on not winging it, but using your own wisdom about the material and the type of cutter? How do you usually do that? Because one of the things we're working on right now is doing more videos on what speeds and feeds to use with particular materials, and how to get that information to the customers. Besides just going down to the details and clicking on the thing and switch to my find my size and all that. How do you usually do that?
That's kind of how I've been doing it for a baseline point. But I've been noticing here and there, it changes so much from company to company what they consider a good baseline to be. Some companies are super optimistic, and you run that first part and you're like, okay, sounds good. You almost have it come out of the vise almost, but then, other companies they just nail it. So usually I do just go to a website for my baseline. For 80%er tools, like you've talked about, at this point, kind of have a gauge of what I know I want them to run at. Right. I'll start there off my own intuition, and then
you say that doesn't look right.
Yep.
Yeah, that this thing is going to go X SFM, and you're like, okay, I'm just going to run that. I'm not going to necessarily worry about the exact number that they told me.
And tests is particularly for face mill. A VF2, it just machined a little bit differently than the VF4. It's just, you have a different machine, they machine differently. I think personally, at least I've noticed with this. So when I put the face mill in there, the finish looked a little bit different. So it just took tests. I put 4-inch block in there, clamped it down, and just kept doing face mill passes of varying thicknesses, tracked what I basically I had from that, whatever looked best, and then came up with my new number for the VF2.
That's great. So you're actually doing a real test. You aren't just like, I'm going to run 10 more pieces and see how they sound. You're like, I'm going to see what depth of cut I can run, et cetera, and alter it. And then, so did you bring those, whatever numbers you generated from that, you bring that forth and you're updating programs from there? That's great.
I guess I was just interested in like how easily you're able to jump from lathe. I know you guys have kind of individuals that are,
Yeah.
like you have another guy that more specializes on the lathe, but do you kind of get to jump back and forth at
A
all?
little bit for like personal projects, mostly.
And do you feel like that's easy to do, or like do you feel like maybe that there's there's common skills that you're able to use, or like how do you feel jumping between them?
I think definitely there's common skills you are able to use. The main thing though it's going to mess with you is I think feeds and speeds, and keeping in mind that your orientation, your axes changed. So your Z is going to the right now, which is kind of, when you're quickly tapping those handle jog buttons, be careful which one you're going for.
Switch your mind.
Yeah.
90 degrees, yeah.
A good programming software is really important to that as well. So in my case, we all use Fusion 360, and it's worked really well for us. Being able to visually see, when you're programming something and understanding what kind of, how you want the machine to be moving to make the parts you want, making sure you have the orientation of what the program looks like on a computer, matches to what it's going to end up looking like in the machine, then it's not too terrible to translate between.
So do you do full simulation?
Yes.
Okay.
And you're designing your parts in Fusion and then moving straight to CAM.
Yes.
In Fusion, all within the same package, right?
So the benefit I found from that is just the parametric aspect. So, if JT wants to do a revision on a part, I already have a program that's set up that's, one of the big programs. I just have to regenerate my program and chances are it'll probably be fine. Sometimes you have a little hiccup here and there, some geometry got deleted or, something funny with the software, but most of the time it's fully parametric.
That is undeniably a benefit for
Do you
sure.
have experience with that you'd like trained at Cal Poly or?
So I had a little bit. It's kind of a funny story. I want to make a wide body kit for my Ford Maverick, and SolidWorks is largely what they use at Cal Poly. But luckily they're introducing some, basically just some Fusion licenses and getting some people on campus that knew Fusion to help students become introduced to that software. So I reached out to one of them, and Fusion has a lot of meshing capabilities, which is kind of what you want for making body and nice curves and stuff. So that's where I was introduced to it. Didn't see Fusion again really for another 2 years. I went through a couple different CAM softwares when I was trying to figure out what I liked. Started off with basic stuff with SolidCAM. Ended up landing on Fusion when I was trying to basically just do a parallel pass on a fuel rail, where a lot of programs that just weren't outputting exactly what I wanted. The Fusion was very straightforward. I felt like it was very easy to use. Got the result I wanted and made the parts I wanted. So my choice was made then.
Yeah, like I decided.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did they touch very much when you were in school? You were using SolidWorks there, right?
Yeah.
Did you do anything with CAM in school, or was it just the CAD part of it?
Not really. There's an opportunity to. I was more focused to general mechanical engineering. If I was focused more toward the manufacturing side, in hindsight, would have been awesome. I think I would have gotten more access
You don't
there.
necessarily know what you need.
Exactly.
A couple of years later, that's how school is, I guess.
But actually, why don't you tell us, just kind of talk freely about what your best-selling product is, your favorite product, what you're working on, anything that you want to kind of promote, I guess.
Okay. Well, I'll pull this one out right now.
Yeah,
I think
if you hold them up, that's the best.
I think it's this plate in particular is probably both my favorite and the best selling for us right now. This one is called an SC plate. It's meant to work with the stock coil setup on an LT. So the way the valve covers are set up, the coil packs sit kind of high, and I have basically the injectors and where the fuel rails hook up to the injectors kind of cut through a little gap in between the coils, which is kind of a different way of doing it. It looks pretty slick, and if it was any little bit off, it would be wrong. So
Just snuck it through.
exactly. So this one's kind of been a fond one for me, and I'm making a lot of them right now, and gonna keep doing that as long as people want them.
Cool. Okay. What else? You want to talk about some of the whatever you want.
So this one's actually it's largely a lot of 3-axis operations. I do it on the VF4 still, though I'm going to move it to the VF2 now because I set one of the pallets up so it could fit 8 of these on there, which would be awesome. But I have one pass here that's done on the 5th axis. Everything else is pretty much basic 3-axis, and it's a Corvette LT4 tensioner bracket. So it basically, you can run your stock LT4 tensioner, and it'll give you a little bit more belt wrap on the tensioner, a little more tension. So a lot of people are having issues now. They're spinning the blowers faster. They have the fueling they need. They're losing traction on the belt, and they're getting a lot of belt slip. This was our fix to that. And at the most basic level, you can just run it on a stock LT4 setup. If you want, we have a 10 rib upgrade kit, so we make our own 10 rib pulleys in-house. And then your belt slip issues are things of the past. Yeah. So another awesome little part here. These are super fun to run and always seem to come out pretty consistent.
How long have you had the TRT 210 on there? Or is that 210? 210, right?
210, yeah.
Put it on right when we got the machine.
Okay.
So the first part we ever made on the machine, it's funny, I should have it around here somewhere. It's a pretty basic looking port plate. It kind of looks closer to one of these LP style plates, but it was super plain, super basic. But we were starting to set up trying to do an angled fixture so we could do it, as a 3-axis part. We're like, oh, well, we got the TRT with this machine, we might as well try to use it. So slapped on the machine and it ended up working out pretty well. And then since then I've had, a couple different revisions of the fixtures. Now I have one that, super stiff, really sturdy, can run 2 plates at once. Yeah, that's kind of what we're stuck with right now. Until we get a UMC.
Is it a leap sometimes to get out of them and out of the kind of the thought, the train of thought, where you're going to make a 3-axis part into, oh, how can I do this on the rotary? Or are you got to the point where you kind of immediately picture how you're going to do that there?
I think I was brought to the point, starting off early on with the TRT, it already kind of put me in the mindset of almost wanting to be 5-axis reliant. Rather than 3-axis reliant. Now the VF2 is kind of switching those modes for me.
Oh, that's funny. That's like opposite how most people are like, are we ever going to do 5-axis? How can I do it? I'm scared of it. All that.
I think the main thing that made me kind of almost a little bit fixture lazy. I want to say, like, I could kind of set up kind of the same generic fixtures, get the parts on there.
Right, you could rotate to all those surfaces without having to fixture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have to build a fancy fixture. Yeah.
So one of the more fun parts I made, though, was it was right before SEMA. We kind of had a time crunch, and I ended up doing a tabbed part. Just cool, because then you hit all the sides of the part. When it was done running, break it off, and don't have any fixturing pretty much at all.
So you probably considered it, I imagine. Since you got the TRT with the VF4, were you thinking about potentially doing a UMC or something like that instead? And you certainly see a ton of them out there, and that style of approach to making parts.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think the benefit of having the VF4 with the TRT is versus having a UMC? Why would you choose to use a UMC at some point, do you think, or would you stay with that style?
I think both have their benefits to them. So the VF4, I do like that it's been such a rigid, like, sturdy machine for me. The TRT, I guess the biggest limitation of it is, size of the plate on it, which the UMC would give me that benefit. But then it's also, with the VF4, I feel that I just always have a reliable 3-axis left side of the table.
Yeah, you got this much over here that is all open for vices. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Makes sense.
Which it almost seems almost a sacrilegious to me that you'd run 3-axis parts on a UMC.
Right. Yeah.
And yet you need to, if you don't have a 5-axis part to put on there, you need to have the spindle turn.
Right.
So you better put the 3-axis
That
part.
machine
Yeah.
running,
That's fair.
Yeah, I think we hear that from lots of customers, and I think it's something that we've said to people. You're like, you don't have to use it as a 5-axis all the time. It'll do all that other work if you don't have some fancy part to put on it.
Mm-hmm.
Can you briefly, and I do not want to make this sound like a commercial because we've made this mistake in the past, but just talk about what you like about Haas and the HFO, just for a couple quick minutes.
And what you don't like, if there's,
Yeah,
I mean, we aren't necessarily we're probably gonna, we're gonna use like 10% of this or something.
I mean, and
But it's
maybe,
useful for us to hear
yeah, and
all of it.
part of that is, why did you choose Haas? Why did you continue to expand with Haas when you do have other choices?
Well, I have to say for us, reliability of being able to get someone out here to work on the machine has been big. Assuming something's wrong with the machine. Overall, we've had very few problems with the machines. That's why we kept going with Haas. Though, if there is any issue you guys are fairly local, HFO is local. We can get taken care of pretty quickly and we don't have to waste time waiting maybe 2 to 3 weeks to get a machine repaired. Why we've kind of also continued to stick with you is largely it's going to be the Haas control. I think it's a big part of that. Getting used to it, having programs set up on the VF4 and understanding that machine when the VF2 came a week after it was, on the floor here and set up, it was running and saved our butts. So if it was a different machine that was running a separate controller, it could have been a month, 2 months before I had good parts coming off of it.
Like Andrew said, if you want to talk about, I don't even want to call them negatives, but just
What challenges have
challenges. There you go. That's a better word.
So I think one thing people can keep in mind if they're going to a pallet pool setup, it's simply just keep your pallets clean going to the pallet pool. I think that's just going to be the biggest hurdle, because if you're getting chips under the pallet, your parts aren't going to be consistent, or you could potentially damage the pallets or the machine itself at those critical alignment locations if you're not being careful. And it also, it's not a, how do I say this? Well, you're just saving yourself from a lot of cleanup at the end of the day. If you're having these, coolant-filled pallets going to the pallet pool, you're probably going to end up with a good amount of coolant on your shop floor too. So being mindful of that, I think, is a big thing. And then being mindful of how many parts can I fit on this pallet and what's the best pallet setup for me. 4 pallets with the same part on it or different setup on each pallet.
You're talking about chips. That reminded me, when you configured this machine, did you have chip evacuation and cooling evacuation on your mind? And if so, how did you configure the machine to deal with that?
Yes, so with the VF4, I think one of the biggest hurdles we came into was chip evac. And that's why we switched to the conveyor and the dual augers on this machine. Now, since that changed, this machine I rarely have to shovel chips out of, which is a huge benefit. The VF4, it's like you're shoveling chips out of it almost every day.
Even with the auger.
Even with the auger.
You're making a lot of chips, they
Yeah.
sit back there in the pan.
And sometimes you get those kind of curly ones from face mill and all that. So the conveyor is really awesome. I think it works great. And it gives you a little more peace of mind as well with nighttime running, right? You're not going to want to have a machine that's not evacuating chips and it's running for 8 hours overnight. So.
I was going to ask that question. So you've got the 4 machines. How often are they running? And you're talking about lights out. How often are they running overnight?
Yep. So pretty much they're running all the time right now. Dustin and I are more or less just bouncing between the 2 machines. For the VF2, nighttime running, it's mostly when I'm running valve covers. So probably a quarter of the time it's doing nighttime running. Longest I've had it go into the night, it's only about 6 hours right now. So I haven't hit my goal yet of the 8 hours of sleep. Yeah.
And I noticed you have the Wi-Fi camera. Are you remotely monitoring when you're not here, or are you using
Yes.
like the Haas Connect feature or anything like that?
Both of them.
Talk a little bit about that.
So for monitoring the machines, camera largely gives me peace of mind of what's going on. If I'm ever just a little, you shouldn't ever really be iffy about anything if you're running overnight, let's be honest. You should have safety features as well, probing tools between pallet changes, just to make sure if there's anything you're running hard, it didn't break during the last operation. The Haas Connect gives you that, and the Wi-Fi camera gives you a little extra blanket that you can feel some comfort, seeing what's going on with the machine and seeing that it finished all the pallets that it needed to. That's largely it. With the Haas Connect app, I don't think I've gone into the interface enough to fully understand its capabilities yet. I see how it basically tells you if the machine is, cycling parts right now, or it's in, right now like sleep mode. But I could really see the benefit for me if there's some way I could power down the machine or, kick it into a heavier sleep mode when I see on my camera that the parts are done running.
Yeah, okay. That's interesting. Okay. Well, I know we've talked about a next generation of Haas Connect, so that's good feedback. We can go back and talk to the IT guys and see.
You haven't had a scenario where it gave you some kind of alert and you're like, oh my God, like run back in.
Like having dinner with your girlfriend, like, oh, I gotta go.
Again.
Like you said, when you're running lights out, you're pretty much confident. You've tested everything.
Yes.
You're not concerned. Like,
Yes.
Waiting for some kind of thing.
So just out of curiosity, are you, with the Wi-Fi camera, are you at home, like, you guys are talking or having dinner?
I gotta check on my baby.
Yeah, honey.
Who's texting you? Nobody's texting.
Actually, I've only really checked it 2-3 times.
Okay.
Or if I'm, it's not very often that I feel I have to check it. The first night was the one that I checked it the most.
Yeah.
After that, I felt fine.
Okay, that's funny.
So that maybe this is something you're thinking about now, or maybe it's something that's in the future. How do you see progression to where you're not the guy running the machine? You and Dustin are not the guys running the machine, and you're having to hire someone to put in here. How big a hurdle is that going to be in terms of all the work you're doing? In terms, maybe they're not programming it, but maybe talk a little about what you've thought about that so far.
So I think a lot of that ends up sitting on the machine programmer themselves. If they, want to have a nice, cycle set up for someone else to run, you have to take adequate notes in your program and set everything up in a way that makes sense and make sure your operator understands, the full, everything that's going on functionally with the program and how you set parts up for changes, I think.
Are you contemplating doing that sooner than later, or is it a ways off?
No, we've been looking for more people to join on the team already. The other thing, though, is like getting the pallet pool and potentially, moving into the area of having robots or, more machines with pallet pools. It's kind of the idea that you can minimize your number of operators, which, yeah.
Are you finding that it's harder to find people than you might have thought, or something? I mean, that's what
Absolutely.
everyone's saying, but
Yeah. No, I think that's definitely a large part of it, and
is it people with not enough experience, or is it just no one at all?
it's almost no one at all, I feel, or a lot of it's like there's a lot of you have to trust in someone's abilities if they're running the machine when you're not looking, right? There's a lot that could go wrong and could really mess up the machine, so you really got to trust what the other person's doing.
Yeah, it's not just scrapping parts, your machine potentially
Yeah.
is at risk. Yeah, we hear that a lot.
Yeah. So you mentioned that maybe you were thinking about a UMC because you're having so much success with the 210.
Mm-hmm.
If you had one, but let's say proof one got dropped off you or whatever, what would you do? What are you thinking your mindset would be in terms of like upgrading your capacity? Would you take an existing part and just how can I optimize, the cycle time, or is there other like parts that you guys are working on that you could foresee using on a machine like that?
Definitely, it's both. For right now, just as a start, it would be. I see the potential of a bottleneck at the TRT 210 right now, because there's just some parts that they need that more or less 3+2 positioning, where now we have plenty of 3-axis capability. Now our limitation is going to be at the 5-axis part. So that's kind of where I would see us starting off with the UMC. But then going from there, it does open a lot of opportunities to have more advanced and larger 5-axis parts.
Is there anything you want to talk about that we haven't gotten on camera?
No, I was just gonna say for something with the automation setup, Haas chip fans where it's at. It's a game
really?
changer. Yeah, if you're gonna have automation, you gotta have that, I think. Which,
It's part of just making sure your pallet's leaving clean, right? That's
Yeah.
basically what you're down to.
yeah, more or less, it's just like when I started this machine off, I wanted to create like some way I could consistently know I cleaned off a pallet between changes, which then it was just setting up. I got the 10-inch Haas fan and I made like a sub-program, which depending on the style of fixture, I have two of them, whether it's kind of a taller fixture or a lower one, getting that fan nice and close, and
It's funny because some of it just seems like you just have to be better at good practices when you get into automation. It's like,
Yeah.
make sure things are clean, do things every cycle, don't let stuff build up. All these things that are easy to ignore and maybe get away with.
Yeah.
It will bite you sooner when you're trying to run lights out.
Absolutely.
But even
Yeah.
like the little things, like did you put like a brush or something, or some kind of piece of felt to like clean off the chips there?
Yeah.
Before it gets loaded again.
Yeah, it was getting just some small chips on the bottom, on points that were though necessary for locating the pallet. So that was kind of just trying to see how he'd clean that up as best we can.
Did Sal take pictures of that?
Yeah. Even if you don't like have something doesn't jump to mind, is there a particular feature like a bucket list thing that you're like, Haas machines are great, but they're missing this one key thing? And even if nothing jumps out at you, that's okay. But I was just wondering.
The one thing that would jump out at me would be that Haas Connect app could turn off the machines when I'm away. It's, not
That's a good one.
too terrible, but it would be nice just to save the power that way.
Yeah, that's interesting for sure.
Yeah, it's because at the factory, we never think about power. Every machine's connected and they just stay on all night long. So that's
Yeah.
something that you really think about is power consumption and trying to,
Yeah.
is that from a dollar standpoint or
Yeah.
from a trying to help the world standpoint?
Well, it could be both, but largely it was a dollar standpoint. I'm going to sound like a better person if I say the other one.
I just want to save the world. One machine at a time.
You reached out to the HFO a lot. Like, did you ever have applications questions for them, or?
I do reach out to them somewhat often. If I have an application question, I'll usually just reach out directly to Richard. He's the guy that trained us on the machines. Okay. And then just sometimes if there's a maintenance issue, and I think a lot of times the maintenance issues you can kind of just fix yourself. I was having a problem with I thought it was Delta Y assembly on my VF4. It was just a product update of the machine. So, small stuff like that. Wiper blades is another one. They got worn out. You can just buy them from Haas. I don't need to have someone come out. Yeah, weight cover blades, sorry. I don't need to have some, come out to do that.
But it's got to be. And if we've talked about this before, then that's cool too. But just to have someone to bounce ideas off of, or just to have like that contact point, it's got to be reassuring at least, right?
Yeah, definitely.